Okay, this is for an op in Biblical Ninjas that started one way and ended another. And it ended down here with Brother Bleedo, my man, and this brother whose name I can't pronounce, Alfred E. Smith. Okay, and I was going to type this, but it probably would have took a little minute to type it all out. I can probably explain it in 5 or 6 minutes, be a lot quicker. So you said, so in that 24th chapter, you have 70 AD, signs of the return, and the end of the world bundled up in that chapter. Above, you said that there were 3 different questions being asked. Well, that's where people get confused. That's where people get messed up, and that's where I used to get messed up. Okay? And your statement here is correct. It's just not totally correct. Bleedo said, end of the world is talking about end of the age, and the sign of thy coming is talking about the day of the Lord, which equals destruction of Jerusalem. Bleedo is absolutely correct. What you're saying, Alfred, is that in that chapter is bundled up the end of the actual world and 70 AD. Not the case. And I used to get confused there as well. And I'm going to illustrate why I used to be confused with that and why most people that read the Bible are confused. So, number one, well, let's deal with it like this. So Matthew 24 is recorded in 2 other places. The Olivet Discourse, or the Abomination Desolation account, is recorded in 2 different places. It's also recorded in Mark and Luke. So we're going to look at all 3 Gospels. In your larger post, you said that there were 3 different questions. This is part of the confusion. People think there are 3 different questions when they read Matthew 24, and this is partially why I used to separate it as you have, because I thought there were 3 different questions. But let's look at Mark's account. This is the same account if you follow my mouse here. Verse 3, and as he sat up on the Mount of Olives over against the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, here's the questions. Tell us, when shall these things be? First question, see that question mark. And when shall be the sign when all these things shall be fulfilled? Second question mark. So they asked him, when are the temples going to fall? And what will the signs be of the temples falling? That's all they asked him. The reason they asked him, what are the signs? Because they understood that the temples falling meant something was a lot more significant than just a calamity. They knew it was a very intense prophetic meaning to the temples being destroyed, just like it was in the Old Testament. So they asked him again, only 2 questions. When will they fall? And what will those signs be of this happening? Well, let's go down to verse, I believe, 34. All right. Verse number 30, rather. Well, I'll start at verse 29. So ye in like manner, when ye shall see these things come to pass, he just gave them all the signs they asked for, know that it is nigh, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, that this generation shall not pass till all these things be done. What things? Things he just mentioned. So the generation he was speaking to wouldn't pass until all those things happen. Luke 21, verse 7. Well, I'll start at verse 6. As for these things which ye beheld, the days will come, in which there shall be not one stone left upon another that shall not be thrown down. Same thing as in Mark 13, the temple. When he told them that, they asked him, Master, but when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming? It says, and they asked him, Master, but when shall these things be, and what sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? So they asked him again, when are the temples going to fall? And what will the signs be of the temples falling? Well, let's go find out the timestamp he gave. He said the exact same thing again in Luke that he said in Mark. So likewise, when you see these things come to pass, the signs he just gave them, know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all be fulfilled. Same thing. Okay. Now when you get to Matthew, it's the same thing. But keep in mind with Matthew that Matthew is writing primarily to a Jewish audience. So he's going to use words and language that a Jew would understand, a first century Jew would understand, but a non-first century Jew likely wouldn't, which is why many of us get confused because we're not first century Jews. Case in point. Okay, so Matthew 24. And this is where the confusion comes in. Aside from the fact of audience relevance, it's partially what I'm about to show you. Verse 3. And as he sat up on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? When will the temples be destroyed? And what will be the sign, same thing, of thy coming? Now this is where people get confused. And this is where I used to get confused. And the end of the world. Two problems. This little word and. Mark and Luke ask 2 questions. Then you come to Matthew, they ask 3 questions? No, it's still only 2 question marks. 1, 2. So in the transcripts, it's still only 2 questions. But the word and is what threw me off. I thought that meant it was 2 questions. That's not the case. Grammatically, it's 1 question. And is a conjunction. You know, the song that we used to hear when we were young, conjunction, what is your function? Well, what a conjunction does is it connects 2 things. It's like a coupling pin. When you drop a coupling pin in between 2 trains, wherever the first train goes, the second train goes. It's the same thing. So, and connects end of the world and the sign of thy coming. And Mark and Luke, the sign of these things happening was the sign of thy coming. Well, he's saying this to a Jewish audience now, so the sign of thy coming, they understand to be something different. He's saying this to a Jewish audience now, so the end of the world is something totally different to a Jewish audience. Okay? So the sign of thy coming and the end of the world are 2 totally different things. Well, let's find out when he said, or are the same thing, excuse me. So wherever the end of the world goes, the sign of thy coming goes. So let's go find out when it shall happen. The same thing he said in Mark and Luke. Here it is right here. Verse 33. So likewise, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the door. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Okay, so whatever was going to happen in their generation. And last but definitely not least, the disciples didn't ask about the end of the world. King James asked about the end of the world. The disciples asked about the end of the age. Biblos.com, and this is Matthew 24, and this is in the Greek. As you can see, I got Greek selected. So you come down to verse 3, come all the way down to the bottom, and the transcript says, what is the sign of your coming and the completion of the age? All right. The completion of the age, not the end of the world, not cosmos, but ainos. So they were asking when was the end or destruction of Jerusalem going to happen, not the end of the physical world. So hopefully that made sense. Like I said, I was going to type it, but it would have took a lot to type that. So I just figured I'd put it in video form. And that's it. Let y'all digest it. So let me know what you think.